Well, look who's back. Oh,
Oh,
boy,
you
I
almost
almost forgot to
forgot
switch
there.
my hat. Hour 6 here of the Common Good-A-Thon, friends.
I feel like we just dodged something.
We now entered into two hands. 6. We're at hour 6. We're not halfway through yet. We've got to finish this hour before we're halfway through of our Common Good-A-Thon. We're asking people of common do-goodery to come on and share with us the goodness they're up to. Some of those people are actors, some of them are musicians, some of them are poets, some of them are candidates for office, some of them are already elected officials. Randy is one of those. Randy, we're getting a little silly around here, so it's just getting a little nutty. So it's a good time to be joining us and bring all that great Missouri goodness. You're running for office in Missouri. What a treat.
That's right. Isn't that fun?
It is fun. I think the last time we were on, I asked you the question that my mother's from Missouri, and she was serious about Missouri, not Missouri. That was a thing that she thought determined what part of Missouri you were from. And is that still a thing, or is that just old lore from years gone by?
People seem to peg that I was not born and raised in Missouri when they hear me say Missouri, so
It's still a
I
thing.
think it might still be a thing.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're glad that you're running for office there, and tell us the state of affairs. Where does it sit?
Thank you. It's going wonderfully. We're growing all the time, and it's a pretty big race. My first race ever was for a state Senate seat that was quite a bit smaller than this gigantic 28 county congressional seat.
Wow.
But there's a lot of excitement. The campaign is growing. We just hired our first paid staff member, and it is, yay! That's like a question people ask you when they want to know how your campaign is going, is how many paid staff do you have? So we just brought on a former volunteer from my last campaign who is just one of the most amazing humans in the world. And she lives right now back in on the East Coast with her family, and she's doing some remote work because she just is amazing.
Well, that's great. What is the right number when someone if someone wants to hear and they say, "Well, how many paid staff do you have on your team?" What's the number you think they're looking for? Like, is it 10? Is it just like
My
2?
problem with that, though, is that we are prioritizing money in politics and money
How
in
it happens.
campaigning when we focus too much on how much money is going into paying people to do the work. So,
That's what I was
you
wondering
know,
too.
yeah, and so of course, as your campaign gets bigger and bigger, you can have more staff. But on the other hand, how big do we want to let campaigns get? And how much money do we want to make the winners need to have? And do we really want the people with all the money behind them being the ones that win?
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. That's what I was wondering. What people are. I wonder if they were like, if what you're hearing from are people that are saying, "I don't want you to have too big of a team," or were you hearing from people who are like, "No, I want to know that I want the New York Yankees level of politics here, where it's just you're buying your way to to victory."
I think most people want to hear more and more paid staff because it means you have more money. It means you're the bigger candidate and you're growing. So, I prioritize connecting to voters over doing a lot of other kind of things. And so far, we've run incredible campaigns on not very much money, and we're good.
Well, yeah,
There you
let me
go.
ask you the question. Let me ask you the question, Randy, about viability, because that often comes up with campaigns and candidates, where especially news media will write articles, you know after financial filings get done with the FEC, and there's always, well, they these campaigns are viable or these campaigns are not viable.
Mhm.
If and too often, viability is judged based on how much money has been raised. I tend to think that there should be different metrics of success. How how are you thinking about your campaign and what viability and what success looks like?
Great questions. And it makes me think of a few different things. First is that the younger generations, and even many people in our older generations, really want to see campaigns and elections done differently. And I'm going to give an example here. I just released my first campaign TikTok video. So I made a very simple video all by myself. It cost $0 and it took nobody's money to do. And I'm nearly at 10,000 views. I've found at least 10 voters in the district who didn't know that I was running, and now we have a connection. And I've received donations from that video. And so, I think there's something to be said for our younger generations running for office, because we are finding more creative ways to do it that aren't the old school, typical, take a lot of money. A lot of people that I know running, of millennials and younger, are really sick of how much money gets spent so quickly in politics. And I'm running in a district that is the poorest in the state of Missouri. And I don't want to take people's money to blow it on mailers that get thrown in the trash. I want to use that money to feed people at campaign events. I've got 1 in 5 kids hungry in my district. Why would we spend this money on flyers? So those are some of my thoughts on that.
Love it. Love it. That's really great. And I don't know, in the last hour we had on, I don't know if you know Kelly Kraut, who's running for lieutenant governor of Arkansas.
Okay.
If you don't, I will introduce the two of you, but Kelly has become a master TikToker, and she's maybe the best political TikToker as a candidate in the country. And so
I'm going to follow her and get some tips then.
Yeah, I'll connect the two of you, because I think you'd hit it off.
Right, Randy, you last ran for office in Colorado, right?
Yes.
Do I remember that right? People are the same in America. We all know that. And people are different in every state. We also know that, right? What are you learning about the people in Missouri that you feel like really matters? Like, what should the rest of us know about these good-hearted Missourians that stretch this large scope of space that your congressional race covers?
Yeah, there's a lot of great things to share. I think a little bit of it for me fits into, I moved from a big city and now I live in a place that is all rural. I mean, our biggest city in my district is 40,000 people, and the second biggest city is 20,000 people, and that's out of 28 counties. So this district is extremely rural. So my perspective that I'm going to share about how amazing these people are and what I love about my fellow Southeast Missourians, I think also comes from that moving from a big city to a rural area. But the people here believe so deeply in helping one another out. We know that we are the only people around when it comes to your neighbors, that no one else is going to be there to save you, especially the government. I mean, there's really not much out here. And I hear such amazing stories from people on the campaign trail about how their community, their local school, or maybe their local church will save a family's entire life with support. So if there's one example that I've heard that really moved me, was that a family's house burned down and the community came together, and through their local church, they fundraised the money to help them buy a whole new home.
Wow. Yeah.
Incredible.
Yeah. Wow.
We were sort of joking earlier.
Oh, go ahead, Doug.
Sorry about that, Rob. Did you have a follow-up to that one?
Well, I was just going to say, that's the kind of good that we're talking about, like there's so many opportunities for people to do good. Sometimes it happens through church, sometimes it happens through government, sometimes it happens just one-on-one relationships. None of this stuff is mutually exclusive. There are so many. There's a multiplicity to the goodness that is available in the world, and what we can, when we participate and we do. So it's so great to hear about that, and knowing that that's just one great example of all the different ways people can experience goodness.
Tell us what you experienced, Randy, like on the insider track here of you walk up to a door, you're at a public place and you're like, "Hey, I'm Randy from Missouri. I'm running for Congress." What do you hear? What do people say to you? What's the, an anecdote or kind of a range of things, or, a composite of
Most
it all?
most people are surprised that a young woman is running for anything, I think, but especially
Hmm.
running for Congress. If I share that I'm running as a Democrat in this very Republican voting area, then I also get big wide eyes that are like, bold move, bold
Mhm.
move.
Mhm.
And so I think I get a lot of respect just because I am different than what
Hmm.
most
Hmm.
people expect to
Nice.
see from someone running for office or Congress.
Hmm.
Yeah. So
There,
talk
there
about
are
running as
certainly
a
places.
Democrat.
Yeah, yeah. Let me
Sorry.
ask a question that'll lead into this one. I think, Rob, for a
Yeah.
lot of people in a lot of places, they feel like Democrats and Republicans are not just two teams in the same competing for the same goal. They feel like they're enemies with
Mm.
two different desires. How much of either of those do you feel like you experience when you hear from these people like, wow, bold move? Are they like, wow, I can't believe the enemy would come into this kind of territory? Or are they just like, hey, it's good to root for the underdog there, Rudy, meaning not the insurrectionist president's lawyer, but the movie.
Yes, Rudy the movie. That's what I thought you were meaning.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, you know, there's a lot of vitriol online and behind closed curtains, but
Hmm.
on the campaign trail, I don't get really anyone that is very rude to me to my face or hostile.
Right.
They are surprised first, usually. Many of them say that they've never really even connected with a politician. And so, and the people here are so friendly to those around them because, again,
Hmm.
it's all we really have is the people around us out here in these rural spaces. And so, even if your differences are massive, most people are still very friendly to you to your face. And I've
Hmm.
had great conversations. And even though I don't agree or they don't agree with me, we still finish out a very good conversation. And I end up having a lot of people be surprised that they talk to such a normal human that calls themselves a Democrat.
Wow.
Yeah.
And, you know, a reason for the divides we have is that we aren't always working across these aisles. Um,
Mhm.
and we're allowing kind of an upper tier of establishment of people with a lot of power that don't want us to work together at the bottom, because then it would mean that their power is no longer possible. And I really find that nearly everyone I talk to on the campaign trail very much feels that people down at the bottom of the ladder need
Hmm.
to be connecting no matter what we think, because the establishment at the top is trying to keep us down.
Wow.
Hmm. Hmm.
Hmm.
So, Randy, I think there's folks that think, listen, this Missouri's a red state. This is a red district. It's a waste of time and money to do this. Um, you clearly don't think that. So talk to us about why it's important to contest these races. Why is it important to not just cede every piece of territory that if you can't win it now, there's no point in even trying. Like, why have you taken a different philosophy and a different approach?
Well, a number of reasons, but I'd say most importantly is that I know very deeply that Democratic policies are going to help rural America, to help my rural district, to help the elderly and the families and the children. I know that Democratic policies that are truly democratic and not passed by, a filthy rich establishment, but that those are the ones that will help people out here thrive. And I see very clearly that the reason we don't have many Democrats in some of these rural areas elected, I mean, there are a lot of Democrats in these rural areas. So the reason why we don't have elected people is that over time we've lost Democratic infrastructure here, and it's led to a lack of voices, a lack of discussion, a lack of representation. And so the reason these areas like my district have become so heavily Republican is there is no other option.
Yeah.
There aren't Dems on the ballot talking about Democratic issues. And I think if there were, no, not even think, I know if there were Democrats up and down the ballot, we would be having different discussions in this district. People would see, for example, how hungry this district is compared to every other district in our state. They would see how poor our district is compared to every other district in the state. They would see how many people have diabetes in this district compared to other districts in this.
Oh, we just lose
Yeah, I
audio
don't
there.
know. Did I may have pushed something on my end, Dan. I don't know how that's possible. Okay, so sorry about that, Randy. I think it's us. I hope you can still hear. You didn't violate any, common good rule or anything. We just, I pushed a button, and I don't know how to. I don't even think I'm running the thing. Dan, are you still with us?
Yeah, Randy. It looks like I'm seeing that guest has muted themselves, so maybe a button accidentally got pushed, or is there a little microphone looking button?
There.
Oh,
There.
all right. Sorry about that.
Hey, that's lesson learned. Somehow, Dan, if I've opened eCam on my side, it took over. So anyway,
Yeah,
okay.
don't
Hi,
do
Randy.
that.
Good to see you again. Thanks for sharing with us.
Absolutely.
Hey, this is a
Magic.
live Common Good-A-Thon that we're doing here. Where we learn on the go. Yeah.
I love it.
Randy, so tell us about the good that you're up to in the world. Like, how do you see that? How do you frame that? How do you think about it in your own mind?
Well, we kind of already talked about my campaign, and I definitely think that that's a big piece of the good I'm trying to do, is to be an opposing voice to what has been here for so long. Because as I said before, Doug cut me off, was that we don't have those voices down here, that opposition sort of. And so people don't even know the other side of our representatives' stories, right? And so I think the good I'm doing is lifting that veil a little bit and giving people some hope in a district that is the poorest and the hungriest, and we have hope, and that's so important to humans, is to have that hope. But letting all that go, something great that I do, or good I bring to the world, is we are fostering cats for a local shelter. And so we had 11 cats upstairs in a big empty closet that we have. There was a mama cat and 10 babies. She had 10 babies.
Oh.
And we raised them until they were 9 weeks old, and then they got spayed and neutered and sent to the shelter, and all of them are adopted now.
Ah, that's awesome.
I had no idea
That's
people
so
even did
great.
this with cats. That's tremendous.
That's
Well,
so
then
great.
let me share, because during spring and fall, there is a baby boom of puppies and kittens. And a lot of local shelters need fosters because they can't adopt out babies under, 8 weeks and until they're spayed and neutered. And so they can't keep them at the shelter, or else they take up a space for another animal. And so if you can foster those little babies, then they have a safe space to run around. They're not being raised in a cage, right? And the shelter can take on more adoptable animals until the ones you're fostering are adoptable.
Wow.
Oh, such goodness. Such good. I mean, that's just, Randy, how can
You know
people
who's got a
find you?
soft
How
spot
can,
for that, Randy? The Ryersees. The Ryersees bring in
Oh,
cats.
Aw.
listen, no,
found
no,
them,
listen. So,
found them
I
wandering
mentioned, yeah,
about.
let me tell you this story. Let me tell you this story. We have 2 cats that have joined our family because their mama gave birth to them in our backyard. And so and they're just about a year old now. And Vanessa and I were on our weekly walk on Sunday, and we get a text from our 18-year-old daughter that says, "Hey, my friend is sick and can't take care of his kitten. So would it be okay if I fostered the kitten? Um, and I understand it's your house and everything, but like, would it be okay?" And so, as we're on our walk, Vanessa and I are talking about this a little bit, and we kind of decide, like, listen, she's going to college in a couple of weeks, and we already have 2 cats and 2 dogs, and another kitten is just too much. So we had decided we were going to say no. We got home from our walk. The kitten was already here.
Oh,
So we now have 3 cats and 2 dogs here in our house. But the kitten, which I attempted to name Robert, and for some reason that hasn't stuck, is not going to stay around. So, Randy, how can people find you? If, we're trying to raise money here with the Common Good-A-Thon for the work that we do, but we understand that you need help as well. You need money. You need volunteers. How can people find you? How can they follow you? How can they donate to your campaign and help you do something really important there in Missouri?
Well, thank you. I have a website that people can find me at, and it's my name, randymccallion.com, RANDIMCCALLIAN. And then I'm also on Facebook, Twitter, and TikTok with my
TikTok.
campaign. Yep, hey,
way to do it.
I will be a TikTok master soon.
Well, Doug started TikToking too.
Yep. Yeah, I'm on there too. Yeah.
Yay, I will find you.
Yeah. Well, please, I need a TikTok buddy. It's just heartbreaking. Randy, thank
I'll be
you.
your
Thank you
first
for
follower.
running. Thanks for your good insight. Just
Yep.
really, really proud to be in all this with you.
Thank you,
Randy.
and good luck to you all on your fundraiser. And I will go donate to Vote Common Good because I appreciate what y'all do.
Likewise for one of those fantastic shirts. We're on it. Thanks, Randy.
Awesome.
Hey,
Thanks,
speaking
Randy.
of TikTok, Rob, who comes to my mind when we're almost 6 hours into a Common Good-A-Thon, and I think TikTok.
What comes to your mind?
Rob Schenk. I think
Rob
Rob Schenk on TikTok. That is what the world needs. You know that question about what does the world need, and the answer is you. What does the world need? Rob on TikTok. That's what I think.
Oh, Rob, do you have a TikTok? Do you TikTok, Rob?
I actually think that a staff person set one up for me, but I've never used it.
Well,
Rob, listen, it
know.
is great to see you, my friend. I'm going to let the two of you talk, and Rob, please mention Dietrich Bonhoeffer as many times as you possibly can to Doug in the course of your conversation.
He thinks I need a little help. Hey, Rob, one of your very good friends, Mandy Patinkin, is quite famous on the TikTok. So just to be clear, it's
no doubt, and he's older than me.
Yeah, he's he would lead the way. I'm sure he would help open all the TikToky doors. Rob, we're asking people, in our Common Good-A-Thon here, what's the goodness that they're up to in the world. And I'm so glad that you were willing to come on today to talk to us, because you do so much good. I'd love to hear, I've got lots of questions, as we've talked before, about the past that you've done, but remind us what the good is that you're up to in the world now, in the context around while that's going on. We're having politicians like Randy McCallion, who you just met there, and people running all over the country, newsmakers, actors, musicians, all manner of folks. So it's really, really good to have you in the mix.
Well, I realized suddenly that I put on the wrong glasses and I'm having a hard time seeing your handsome face. Oh, there we go.
You can just
Now
let your mind's eye remember. You had them right there. You just made the quick switch.
I had no idea. Uh, hey, thanks for inviting me. And I'd like to think, the most or the best good that I'm engaged in now is giving some folks who think differently in my evangelical tribal camp. They are thoughtful, reflective uh, dissenters
Hmm.
from the orthodoxy that I think has not only contaminated American evangelicalism, all but fatally, and
Hmm.
maybe we are on a moribund track here,
Hmm.
but uh, has also damaged deeply the otherwise really good history.
Hmm.
Folks today may think that evangelicals can do nothing good. Well, evangelicals were once the drivers in the abolitionist movement
Mhm.
against slavery in this country. They were once advocates of full women's rights. In fact, uh, would it surprise anyone to find out that evangelicals were some of the first religious bodies to ordain women
Hmm.
and
Mhm.
place them in full positions of authority within the church world? Um, and then, of course, evangelicals were initially pro labor and um, and against uh, child labor, abusive
Mhm.
child labor, and on it goes. There's a great history here, ruined, I would say, by the last 50 years. But there are many, many evangelicals of conscience who need support. They need to be buttressed. They need to be affirmed. They need community. And a lot of them are changing their voting habits, certainly their personal engagement with vulnerable peoples, and
Mhm.
on and on
Mhm.
it goes.
Mhm.
So I'd like to say that one of the things I'm trying to do is encourage and equip and support those dissenters who have a lot of good to do in the
Yeah.
wake of a lot of harm.
And you know that history well. You know how the shift took place in these last 50 years.
I was part of it. I was part of
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, and people who know your story, and if they don't, Costly Grace is a book they can read and tells that story. You've done lots of interviews. You tell it well. And one of the fears that a lot of people have is that there was a welding, I was gonna say a wedding of
Mm.
religious identity and Republican identity, but welding feels like a better word, that makes it almost impossible for some people to detach those. So when some people break their religious identity or the spell that has on their political identity, they really don't want to just do it again on the other side, right? They don't want to say like, "Hey, I've developed in my faith. I've kept growing the way my faith calls me to, and so now I've hardwired myself into the Democrats rather than being hardwired into the Republicans." It's a great concern. I worry about that in the work we do and all the rest. Do you have any advice about that? Do you have thoughts about how people can and should or could engage in politics as a person of faith without it being so much of, you know, what you talking about the history has brought us?
Yeah, well, I'd begin by saying stay true to your conscience. It's a battle.
Okay.
It's hard. Look, human nature is we are joiners.
Hmm.
I'd like to look at the upside to that,
Nice.
which is, when you join up with something good.
Hmm.
One of the reasons I joined up with you and Common Good is because I said these are people I want to keep company with. I want to be identified with. It's a cause that I want to engage in, and that's a good, proclivity that we have as human beings. We need each other. It's why we need community. It's why we need family. It's why we need friends. It's why we need movements. And but there's a vulnerability to that, and we have to be careful that we let our conscience lead and not groupthink. That's important. Remain a critical thinker, and that's like exercise. It takes discipline.
Yeah.
It requires sometimes enduring a little pain. And so it's work. It's hard work to remain a critical thinker. And I don't mean a critic. That's a different. That's something
that comes easy.
Yeah. Not a complainer. Not a carper. I mean somebody who gives constructive analysis, weighs benefits and liability and risk and benefit and good and bad, doing the philosophical work. And that's rigorous and requires dedication. So that's part of it. The other is to realize that political groups are political groups. And they can be very, very constructive. It's the way we organize ourselves as a body politic. That's okay. That's good. But they aren't the answer to everything. They have a place, but only a place. And our ethics and our sense of morality and our sense of communal values and all the rest are often far more important than a political agenda or objective.
When a number of your friends from your past work life, as somebody who worked on the religious right and were a major player in the religious right, say to this day that they order their identities as being a Christian first, then a conservative, and then a Republican.
My prayer partner, Mike Pence,
is one of the most,
my one-time prayer partner.
Yeah. I think I cut you off there. You were saying someone you know quite well. He says it, and a lot of people I know feel that, right? He speaks for a lot of people who want that to be true. Is that the best way for people to think about identity, like religious and political identity, is to put them in first, second, and third order? Or do you, and the work that you've done studying, Dietrich Bonhoeffer and running now the organization you started, the Bonhoeffer Institute, do you think there's a other way for us to think about our identities that doesn't sort of just order them in importance with a 1, 2, and a 3 like that? Is there a better way to do it?
Wow, this may be one of the deepest questions I've ever been asked on a 2-dimensional platform.
Great.
It's certainly a way to describe oneself or to relate, to the people in the world around us. I think I agree with your questioning whether it's the best way to do it. I mean, first of all, one of the things that Dietrich Bonhoeffer, this young, brave, brilliant church leader in World War II era Germany, one of the first voices to speak out against Adolf Hitler's racialized dictatorship and ultimately genocidal regime. One of the things he really helped me to do posthumously, I say one of my best friends is a dead German. And, long after his death, reading his great legacy in ethics, was to appreciate human beings. As a Christian, I believe that God entered this world as a real person, not as a magical person. Bonhoeffer says, entered into our humanity including into our suffering. So, I would say we bring our humanity and our person to anything we do, whether it's, yours and my friendship with each other, whether it's to our marriage, whether it's to our relationship with our children, or to our neighbors, our communities, our political engagements. We bring our humanity there. And so maybe the best thing for all of us to do is just to simply say, I'm a human. I'm a human being, and I honor you as a human being. And not categorize or compartmentalize ourselves at all. Maybe not fragment ourselves, but this is really the meaning of the word integrity. Becoming a whole, an integrated person, a whole person. And I think sometimes when we separate ourselves like that, I'm a Christian and then I am something else, and then I am something else.
Yeah.
We kind of allow ourselves privileges in those other spaces that maybe work against our humanity.
Yep. Yeah, I've wondered it too. I don't know. It's just something about it. Very few people I can ask about it. I know a lot of people struggle with it because the question of identity is just so overwhelming. It's so powerful to all of us about where do we find ourselves. And it's not just a 21st century question. Both of us who've studied theology and do this work are like, this was an entire thing that the early Christians in the time of biblical writings were about, right? It's like Christ identity and how you find yourself, and where does Jesus call people to leave, to embrace their Jewish heritage, but then to go beyond it into the kingdom of God. And like, this is just the real work of humanity. And so there's days where it feels like, I don't know, maybe we're having a particularly American problem, because sometimes I hear this from people around the world. Well, they'll say like, well, man, in the U.S., religion and politics just mix in a way that we don't have in our country. We don't really think about it that way. And I'm like, well, I don't know. Good for you. I don't know who doesn't have this struggle. It feels like it's been, offer to God what is God and to Caesar what is Caesar's. Like that's sort of a thing that's been around for a long time. So it feels like it's one of the questions that a lot of people need to think about, and we're not good with in our country. We can move from Christians who care about politics to Christian politics to Christian nationalism, in one paintbrush stroke. You just end up there at the end of the stroke, and all of a sudden you're in that world. Well, we can't take too much more of your time. We have a lot going on, but tell us what the Bonhoeffer Institute is up to now, and how people can be how they can be involved in it, because your current work is is far more powerful even than any of the past work you've ever done. So love for people to know about it.
Thank you. Well, again, inspired by this brilliant young mind and heart in Germany, we use Bonhoeffer's insights to help shape and form what we call ethically courageous leaders. And we all get tested in that. When it's time for us to do right, even sometimes at great personal cost or even risk, it falls to us to do right. And we hopefully, we can help people to do that very thing in all spheres. But we like to start in the church, because right now I would argue that a corrupt Christianity in America is the greatest threat facing this country. Because once you put religion at the service of the bad, the evil, the harmful, you give it great advantage, because to question it is to question God. So we don't even question, for example, corrupt leadership, because if they are placed there by God, who are we to ask? Who are we to question God in any way? So this becomes an enormous advantage for whoever the perpetrator of that evil is. But beyond that, it presents an ongoing threat really unparalleled threat. So we have to do that work within religious communities. That's what we concentrate on, and you can find out more about how you can benefit from that or participate in it by visiting our website at TDBI for the Dietrich Bonhoeffer Institute. You don't even have to know how to
spell Bonhoeffer.
TDBI. We got it.org.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Yeah. Smart thinking as somebody who maybe in your early days had to double check your spelling of Bonhoeffer a few times. Yeah, which I have also misspelled. As someone who has one of those funny spelled names that people often give me 2 G's and 1 T, and you might get that with Schenk. Maybe people
all
are
the time. All the
dropping
time.
dropping a C or adding an H or throwing Aaron K. Well, Rob Schenk, thank you so much. Thank you for your for your good work and for sharing all the goodness that you're up to with us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for the good that Common Good is doing, Doug.
And thanks for being part of our 6th hour, Rob. And hey to all of you. So our 6th hour, we're going to finish here with a conversation that I had with Michael Waters. Michael Waters is a pastor. He's an activist. He's a writer. He's just tremendous. He couldn't be with us today, but we talked just yesterday. So I might be wearing the same outfit because I tried to match that to make it look sneaky. But can't pull anything by in all of you folks. So here's my conversation with Michael Waters. I know you're going to find it just unbelievably great and helpful because he is just such a charm. All right. So Michael Waters, you're up to all kinds of good in the world. Thanks for all your friendship and support and work with Vote Common Good, of course. What else are you excited about that's happening in the world? What's the good that's coming? Boy, I know you, man, you could talk about pastoring. You could talk about activism. You could talk about your children's books. You could talk about your adult books. There are and probably a whole list of things I haven't even touched on yet. But what are you up to, and what are you feeling good about in the midst of these difficult times?
These are difficult times, but I'm feeling good about the energy and momentum that I'm seeing across the nation. The energy and momentum that I'm seeing right here in the state of Texas. There seems to be a sense of hope that together we can bring about change. And you see that in the persons who are showing up to stand in very difficult places and yet still standing together, believing that come this November, we can have a different state right here in the state of Texas. And in fact, we can have a different nation if we continue to show up for one another. That gives me hope. I don't believe that people have quailed in fear in this time. I don't think that they are experiencing cowardice. I see a great uprising of people of goodwill, do-gooders, if you will, who are showing up. They're showing up to register people to vote. They're knocking on doors. They are showing up to phone banks, and they're calling their neighbors, encouraging them to get involved. That they're showing up in ways of civil disobedience, which I think is also important, to stand out and to stand against the ongoing move of oppression. They're writing beautiful liturgies. They're creating documentaries. They are showing up in town squares. This is a time that is ripe with goodness. And oftentimes, as I said, the light shines the brightest in the midst of the darkness. And I'm seeing that light shine in so many spaces and places around me.
And Michael, you and I both worked in the pastoring world, right? And when you're in that, when you're in the pastor world, you recognize that politics are important, but you really have to do a lot of work to get people to the place where they can be engaged in political life. A lot of people don't like politics. A lot of people feel like it's too divisive. They feel like it's something confusing to them, that it's not fair. They just don't want to be involved and engaged. Can you talk a bit about the work in politics and with the other parts of our civil society that are necessary to get all of us to the point where the way we think about our political life is something that's, frankly, better and not only dictated by the powers of politics and by the people who organize our political discourse in this country?
Absolutely, Doug. And people have so many things that are going on in their lives that are demanding their attention. And I get that. And a part of the ways in which you are able to invite people into the process is to inform them, enlighten them on the ways in which politics is impacting their daily lives or has the ability to impact the lives of their families or their future goals and aspirations. Most recently, right here in the state of Texas, There has been conversation in terms of our textbooks about renaming slavery to involuntary relocation. And of course, people are going about their daily lives, but when they hear that, it's an awakening as to what our leaders are attempting to teach our children, how they're attempting to sanitize our history. And anytime you start impacting people's children, they are awakened to their responsibilities. And so that's one way in which I've seen people become more engaged. Unfortunately, right now in the state of Texas, for a woman or girl who becomes a victim of sexual assault, and in the midst of that sexual assault becomes impregnated, there is nothing within our state laws that would allow them to have a safe abortion. As a matter of fact, right here in the city of Dallas, a woman would have to travel over 300 miles to Wichita, Kansas, in order to receive that vital service. And we know that people of color and the poor are most impacted by these new barriers to abortion. And as we talk about that and expand the conversation about how that really impacts us on a daily basis, the women and men, frankly, within our community, the decisions that they must make, and what leaders are doing to take away our civil liberties, that invites people into the conversation. When we talk about the fact that over 30,000 mail-in ballots were disappeared or were not received as a part of the primary elections, and we talk about how that's impacting elderly persons or other abled persons and their ability to participate in the democratic process, people's eyes are being awakened to these realities. So what I'm finding, Doug, is how we tell the story of what is happening, the very dubious practices that are intended to shut out our neighbors from participating in any semblance of democracy. That I believe is calling people to account and calling them into the process. It's about, again, telling the story and telling the story in such a way that breaks it down to how this is impacting individuals on a daily basis, as well as their families. I'll give you one more right here from the state of Texas, that we have a significant health crisis right here in our nation, and we have not yet received the Medicaid dollars that have a long time been directed into our state, or at least were set aside for use in our state. So literally there are people who are dying or who are going without, and the money's just sitting there because our state leadership have failed to receive those dollars. And so when people become aware of these atrocities, and unfortunately so many more, what I'm finding is that they're beginning to show up. And I'd be remiss, Doug, obviously, if I did not also mention the great tragedy that we experienced in Uvalde with those beautiful children and their teachers. Their lives were taken. And so many Texans in particular, and persons around the country, are just fed up, having just gone through this July 4th weekend near Chicago in Highland Park. A young child now, 2 years old, who went to the parade with parents that are no longer with us. People are fed up and they're tired of elected leadership not doing anything, right, to change those realities. And so telling that story and letting people know that with their vote and with their presence, we can make change, I think is having a tremendous outcome.
Yeah, really powerful. Hey, can you say a few words? We talked a week or so ago on another Zoom call like this, and you said something about hope that I'm wondering if you'll touch on again around this notion. For a lot of people, they live in a situation where their political engagement via their vote won't have any impact, either because they're of a political party that's outnumbered, or they live in an other state. Like there are people who live in a state where they're quite happy with what their state is doing, but they get frustrated with what's happening in Florida or in Minnesota or or there in Texas. And when people hear, what you're describing, and they hear these circumstances and situations, I know so many people get frustrated, and they think that's just not the way it should be. And then they realize they can't do anything about it. The vote that they cast is either just a drop in the political bucket, or it's not in the state where these difficult situations are happening. Short of people being able to turn out and vote, because for a lot of people that's not going to do it. How can people, I don't know, how should people think about these kinds of difficult topics that you've so, articulately shared?
Well, you know what? I think of several ways. Well, in the midst of our conversation, we're talking about the power of hope, right? And that hope is not hope if you already have the thing that you're hoping for, right? It's not hope. Hope is about believing and moving to obtain that thing, confident expectation of what you believe coming to pass. And that is such a powerful tool that moves us forward in the face of opposition and keeps us with the belief at the forefront of our mind that ultimately good will conquer out over evil and that we can make a difference. I recently saw a social media dialogue that I had to just enter a word into because an individual who lived in a different state was saying, I'm so glad that I don't live in these red states, or I'm so glad I don't live in these places where these rights are being taken. I'm isolated. This will never impact us. The unfortunate reality is that things spread literally like a virus in our nation. Dr. King, I think, said it best that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And I don't think that any of us can just feel totally safe and protected in the spaces in which we live in our country while certain atrocities, while certain injustices are allowed to move forward. And certainly there are movements in opposition to democracy happening all over the country. And while it may be small where you are right now, or may not have the same political influence that is having in other places, it does not mean that virus won't fester and create some challenges where you are. And so I think we have to speak out. So maybe it's not happening in my state, but certainly I can give to those in other states. If I believe in their cause and I believe in that work, I can give to organizations, right, who are working across the nation, organizations like Vote Common Good, who are everywhere. I mean, literally everywhere, making an impact in the elections that matter the most, supporting candidates, uplifting community, putting forth the platform for the common good, and enlarging the table of participation so many others can come and participate in the blessings, frankly, that America does have in store. It was Langston Hughes had a wonderful poem that really has been resonating with me. And part of that poem, he says that America will be, suggesting that America certainly has not fully lived into the totality of its promise, but it's that hope that we're mentioning, that America will be, that it will become the nation that it should ultimately be. And all of us have a part to play. And so if I'm in a state where these rights are still accessible to my family, still accessible to my neighbors, but I have the capacity, ability to support the work in a state and place where it is not, then I should do that. If I have opportunities to volunteer, to support, all of us are in this together. At the end of the day, I want us to be mindful of this. I really believe this, Doug. At the end of the day, when January the 6th happened, that was an attack on all of us, whether we were in that Capitol building or not. That was an attack on American democracy. It was an attack on Republicans. It was an attack on Democrats. It was an attack on independents. It was an attack on our nation, on persons who've never been a part of the political process, right? And we've got to call that out. We've got to be mindful of those realities, and we've got to do everything within our power to secure the promise and opportunity for democracy, not only for ourselves, but for future generations.
Yeah, and speaking of future generations, a lot of people, put a lot of hope in the future generations. They'll say things, that they think demographics are going to change enough, or that younger people will have a different set of experiences and will change it. I'm a bit dubious that will simply happen. I mean, I've just watched too many generations come and go, and I think 50 years ago when I was born, I don't think anybody would have looked, 56 years ago when I was born, I don't think anybody would have looked forward 56 years and thought the things that have happened in our society would have, that the generations aren't simply going to solve this. But we certainly should invest in our future generations and support and help them in the difficult work that they're going to have to do. You're doing some interesting work with kids. Can you say a bit about these kids' books? I think it's really important, really great. You've written award-winning, best-selling kids' books. Can you say a bit about that?
I appreciate that. And I think that's a very important word that you just spoke to us, Doug. If I can call again on the King family, this time, Coretta Scott King, she said, and I'll paraphrase, that each generation has their own struggle in which they must engage in, right? That the fight for justice is not accomplished in one single generation at one single time. It's something that every generation must arise to and do what they can within their own time to move forward. I am so inspired by young people, inspired by the young people within our own household, our four children, inspired by the young people that I have been so wonderfully blessed to engage in schools across this nation who are reading and engaging the books that I've written for children. One for beautiful Black boys who believe in a better world, and another Liberty Civil Rights Road Trip. And I've been in those places to talk with the children and to hear directly their insights. And I will tell you, Doug, anyone that has spent any time with young people, I don't think can leave from that engagement without a sense of hope, right? They have a, unfortunately, because all that they have seen and endured in a very short expanse of their lives, to me, they have a different sense of understanding, an awakening, if you will, of what is at stake. I was with some young people, Doug, in the Bronx, and those young people, while they're talking about violence, had just lost one of their young classmates when a stray bullet fatally impacted their life. And to hear those young people talk about how wrong that is and what needs to be done to protect other young people like themselves was not only inspiring, Doug, but in many ways it was convicting. It was convicting in the sense of calling me, and I think all the adults who were present to hear, to ask the question, what am I doing? And am I doing enough in my time, in this generation, to protect the needs of young people? I think a part of sharing with young people is to try to, again, teach them a more appropriate, authentic history of our nation that really tries to include many of the voices that have been muted or silenced over time. And this is a great big nation with so many stories and so many people who've contributed greatly to our history. And many times we don't hear their stories. And so I have been privileged again to be in the company of young people, to have them engage these books, to hear their enlightening and direct questions about the world as it was, world as it is today, and to envision along with them, again, what are the possibilities for change. I know that we invest a lot of hope in the future, and I don't think that's wrong. I think we have to be balanced in that. I think we have to make sure we're not simply trying to pass the buck and say they're going to fix it down the road, right? But what we should do is say, let's do all that we can in our time to make the contributions that we can, and let's do all we can to give the generation of tomorrow, the generations that arise, and emerging generations, what they need to bring about change. And I'll say this finally, Doug, I've also had to try to correct my language, because sometimes I know sometimes we talk about young people as though they're going to work in some future time, when in fact we see young people showing up right now in very bold and powerful ways for our environment, very bold and powerful ways pushing for gun reform, very bold and powerful ways of enlarging the table of welcome in our country. And in that regard, I think that they are speaking, challenging, and even teaching us some things for what we should also be doing today.
Yeah, that is really well said. You know, the fact that so many of our leading politicians are in their 70s and 80s sort of makes a lot of us look like young people in the political spaces, right? It's really something. It's time for a generational shift, and it feels like we do have to work toward all that. Well, Michael, thank you so much. Any final words you want to leave with the good people in this Common Good-A-Thon?
You know what, Doug? Just last week, I had the privilege of being in the White House complex for a meeting there, and I brought with me an artifact. As you know, I have several artifacts from the history of our nation. And one of the artifacts I brought with me, Doug, were authentic shackles from 1806 that were used at auction in Charleston, South Carolina. And as we were having that dialogue, I reached in my bag and I placed those shackles on the table in the midst of the circle of conversation, and began to openly ask, what is our responsibility today, given the history that we see there resting on the table? What is our responsibility now, given where we know we've come from? And in many ways, Doug, I think that that's what is resonating with me now, is that we have to put on the table, literally, all of the histories that have informed this nation. We've got to put on the table all of the communities that are going through such great oppression, who are facing such great hardship. And then we have to look at those things on the table and ask ourselves, what is my responsibility given what I see before me? And so this certainly isn't the time to pass the buck. This is not the time to disengage. This is not the time to say, well, someone else will handle this. This will take all of us working together, and everything matters. You may not be able to show up and knock on doors to register people to vote, but maybe you can be a part of making those phone calls. You may not be able to make the phone calls, but maybe you have something that you can give to support a candidate or support a cause or support an organization like Vote Common Good and the work that is happening in the world. You may not be able to do what others can do, but all of us can and should play a role in trying to, in many ways, raise up the soul of this nation and make it better than it has been. And so I think that's the open invitation. All of us have a responsibility. We, the people, right, will be a part of determining what type of nation we will ultimately be. And all of us have a role to play. And I believe if we do find what it is that we can make a contribution in this time, we will see ourselves becoming the America that we're supposed to be.
Amen, my friend. Amen. Well, thank you, Michael Waters.
Thank you, my friend.
See you in a bit. Yeah. Oh, I had the wrong hat on already. All right, so we're going to finish out this 6th hour. We're going to start into our 7th hour here in just a minute. We're so glad that you're along. We're going to reset this, and then we're going to be back. We've been promising you musicians all day. You've been hearing us say it for 6. If you've been watching for 6 hours, talking to you, Jim Eaton, talking to you, Alex. I've been watching you guys in the chat. I know you've been here. And all of you for your donations. Thank you so very much. It's been incredible. We're at $24,428. It's mind blowing. Hey, we're going to be back in 1 minute. We're going to do a reset. You're going to be back with those musicians, Reverend Vince Anderson, who's also the subject of a documentary. We're going to show you clips from that. And you're going to be back with Ben Grace. So we're going to have a little musical conversation, and Ben's even going to play some music. So stick with us. We'll be back here wherever you're watching this. And if you're not yet watching over on the YouTube channel, go on over to YouTube and watch over there on Vote Common Good channel over there, or on the Vote Common Good page if you're only watching on Facebook or Twitch or those places. All right, we'll see you in a minute.